Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video in the Spigot series. In this episode I'm going to show you how to work with the menu manager module of the SimpAPI. Alright, so you may have heard of my SimpAPI. It's basically a API that you can use with your Minecraft Spigot plugins so that you can make them more easily. It's got a bunch of different things to make your life easier, like the command manager, the menu manager, color translator, skull creator, and more stuff coming soon. And yeah, so hopefully you've seen my SimpAPI introduction video. If you haven't, then make sure to go watch that, because I give an overview of what it is. And yeah, so I've made a lot of improvements to the menu manager in the last few days even, so it's improving steadily just to make everything easier. But what is it, right? What is a menu manager? The menu manager is simply a utility to create inventory menus within the Spigot plugins really easily. So currently you can do this using inventories, bucket inventories, and you can make them, you can put items in them, you can handle the clicks with a click event. But it gets really tricky when you get into stuff like passing data between the menus, and there's not really a specific utility within the Spigot API to allow inventory menus and use them really easily. So this is what this is for. It's an abstraction to create these GUIs really easily so that you don't have to worry about all of the small details, and you can just do it so easy and pass the data between them really easily. And yeah. Anyway, so hopefully that's a decent explanation. If it's not, then you're going to see the power of the menu manager in this episode. So let's get started here. So first of all, I want to show you the GitHub page for SimpAPI. It's right here. You can find a link for this in the description below, and it gives you all the information like the Maven and Gradle imports and all that. And you also have some basic tutorials here for the menu manager, and the command manager will be coming soon. So yeah. The menu manager was actually a little more complicated, but I actually simplified it last night to make it even more easy to use, which is really cool. So you can look at this page for updates, and you can also join our Discord for continual updates as well, just to know the latest and greatest updates that come along to SimpAPI. But anyway, so this is like what I'm going to be using with almost all of my plugins from now on, just my complex plugins, just to make them more easy. Because the utilities within this I use within all of my projects already, so I threw them into this one API for you to use yourself. Just import it and then you can use it really easily. Anyway, so this is where you can find the information. So we're going to just go ahead and copy this. Actually, first we need to make the project, so let's go ahead and do that. So file, new project. Give me a second, I'll set this up real quick. Okay, so I've got the plugin created here. It's called Iceberg, so it'll be just a simple plugin that allows you to freeze players and also unfreeze them through the GUI menu system. So that's what we're going to be working with this episode. And so the first thing to do whenever you make a new project that is going to be using the SimpAPI menu manager is to go to the pom.xml if you're using Maven, or the Gradle file if you're using Gradle. But I like to use Maven. But go ahead and first I'm just going to change our Java version here to 1. Or just 16, so we can use Java 16, because this is a 1.17 Minecraft plugin. You can use 1.8, so no problems will come from that, but I like to use just the latest because it makes me feel good inside. Anyway, so make sure you click that button up there to reload that. But let's go ahead and go to our GitHub here and copy the repository, and then just put it right here, and then we'll copy the dependency as well. There we go. Okay, cool. So this is the latest dependency version. You'll find that version on the GitHub page, the latest version on the GitHub page. It'll always be updated there. So once you add that, click the Maven button up here to reload it and import the dependency. So now it's going to bring in SimpAPI to our project. Great, already. Okay, great. So the first thing you want to do when using the menu manager is set it up. So to do that, you're going to do menu manager from SimpAPI dot setup. And this will set up the menu manager. So you just got to pass in the server. So get server, and then the plugin instance. So this, because this is within the main plugin class here. And we can go ahead and get rid of that. We don't need that. So now that we did that, it's actually ready to be used. So we can go ahead and create a new package for our menus to live inside of. So menus. There we go. And the first menu we're just going to create is the main menu. So we'll call it Iceberg main menu. And so to create a menu, you're just going to create a class and extends menu, because menu is an abstract class from, make sure it's the one from SimpAPI, not from java.awt. So now we got the menu here, extending that. Great. And now you can import all of the abstract methods, or not import, implement them. Click OK, and that'll add all these here. So let's go through these one by one, but first let's add the constructor as well. There we go. So, okay, so one by one, let's look at these methods here provided by the menu abstract class. So the first thing is the menu name. So this will be what appears at the top of the screen, like the inventory name. So we're just going to call this one Iceberg. So the second one is the slots. So slots are these are just like regular inventory slots. So you can set it to 9, 18, 27, 36. It's just multiples of 9, but the highest is 54. So what we're going to do for ours is just set it to 9, because we don't really need that much space for this. So 9, there we go. And so this one here, cancel all clicks, this will just be a method that if you return true, it'll make it so that you cannot move any of the items in the inventory, okay? So if you have an inventory GUI menu where you don't want them to be able to move things around, you only want them to click buttons and stuff like that and just click, then you set this to true. Otherwise, if you set it to false, which is the default, so they can move the items around. Normally, without the SimpAPI, you would actually have to set up this functionality yourself and handle it, so you would have to cancel clicks and stuff like that. But with this, it's much easier and it does it for you. Okay, so the second thing, we'll skip this one for now. Let's go to the set menu items. This is where you set what items are going to appear within the menu itself, okay? So it's really easy. All we're going to do is create a new item stack here. So item stack, freeze player. So this will be a button to open up the freeze player menu. So import item stack. And you can just do new item stack if you want to, just the normal way of creating items, or you can use a utility method provided by the menu class called make item. This is inherited from the menu. And so you can provide the material of the item. So in this case, we're going to do packed ice because it's like a freeze button. The second option will be the display name of the item. So in this case, we'll call ours, let's say freeze player. How about that? And this one is optional. The last one is a var args parameter, and you can just do you can specify any lore for the item if you want any lore to appear under the item. So pretty simple, right? That's how you can create items using the make item utility. So let's create our second item. We'll call this one melt player, because we're also going to have a second part of the GUI interface where you can melt players that are already frozen. This one will just be a lava bucket because that makes sense, right? So also, if you want to add some color to your display names, you can use the color translator provided by SimpAPI. So color translator, and this will allow you to translate normal color codes and also hexadecimal color codes. So and E and L melt player. So that'll be melt player in bold. I mean not bold. Yeah, bold yellow. Okay. Let's make this capital P, and let's also add some color to this one. Why not, right? So color translator dot translate color codes melt player. This one will be B for aqua, because that's like a blue color. Melt player, great. Or no, not melt, I mean freeze. There we go. Cool. So now we have those two items there, but that itself won't, add it to the inventory. It'll just obviously create the item stacks. So how do we add them to the inventory? So since we have a menu abstract class here, this gives us a bunch of stuff, all these methods here, the make item method, but it also gives you an instance of the inventory itself that will represent the GUI. So you can grab that from the super class that we're inheriting from. So inventory dot, and you can just use it as you would normally use a inventory object. It's just a regular bucket inventory object. So we're just going to add that to the inventory. So set item and a specific slot, so 3, and then freeze player, and then inventory dot set item 5 melt player. So that'll add the two items that we've created to the Iceberg main menu. Okay. And we're going to leave this one empty for now. We're going to come back to this and I'll explain it how it works. But now let's test out this menu to see if it works and what it looks like. So let's go to Iceberg. And actually, we're going to need a new command to test this out, right? So we're going to create a new Java class command. And we're going to call this the Iceberg command. Iceberg command. Great. So we're not going to use the command manager because it's just one simple command. So we'll just implement command executor. So we're just creating a very, very simple bucket command. Nothing crazy, right? Return true. Okay, so inside of this, we want to see if the person is a instance of player. So if sender instance of player P. So this is a Java 16 instance of pattern match. So now we can do menu manager. And this is how you open an inventory. Okay. Open a menu, whatever, same thing, right? Open a menu for a player. So this is how you do this. So menu manager dot open menu. So the first thing you need to pass in if you do control P is a class instance or class reference, object reference of the menu that you want to open. So in this case, we want to open up the Iceberg main menu. So you're not going to do new Iceberg main menu because it's asking for a class reference here. So we can do Iceberg main menu dot class, and that's how you can obtain that. So get that class reference and then also pass in the player that you want to open the inventory for. So in this case, it will be P. Okay, so this will open up the menu for that player, but also we have to handle the exceptions here, which is okay. So we'll collapse this here. Great. So hopefully that'll work. Let's see if it works. Oh yeah, we also need to register it, don't we? And also register it within the plugin.yml. So we'll go back to our main here and do git command. We'll call it iceberg.setExecutor new iceberg command. Perfect. And let's go to the plugin.yml, do the same thing here. So commands, iceberg, description, open the iceberg menu. Awesome. So with luck, this will do everything we want it to do. So let's go ahead and run this to find out. Also, let's add the iceberg commands within a commands package. Oh, that's why I created a class on accident instead of a package last time. So there we go. We'll just move that here. Boom. So now that's more organized. Anyway, so let's run this now to compile the plugin, and we're going to throw it in the server to see what happens. So when we join, we're going to run the iceberg command, and it should open up the menu that we created using the menu manager from SimpAPI. So iceberg, and boom, look at that. There we go. We got iceberg, which is the menu name that we set. And then we also have the freeze player button, and then also the melt player button. Cool. And we cannot move it around, as you can see. It doesn't let us move anything. That's because we set cancel clicks to true, which is perfect. Great. Yeah, so let's keep going. Let's make this even more advanced. Okay. So, by the way, so let's go back to Iceberg main menu here. And let's say that you set this cancel all clicks to false, by the way. Let's say that you want to customize what can be clicked and what can be moved and what cannot be moved. This is where you would handle that, and this is where you would also handle what happens when you click items or buttons in this case, because it's like a GUI, right? So it makes more sense to call them buttons. So let's say that you only want them to be able to move this one, but not this one, right? So we can do if e.get current item, which is the item that they clicked on, .get type is equal to material dot ice, was it packed ice? That's what that item was. So if it's packed ice and we don't want them to move the packed ice, then we can do e.set cancel to true, and this will prevent them from moving it. But else, if we want to allow them to move anything else, we can do e.set cancel, or just leave it, right? So it only cancel it if they click that one. Okay, so that's how you can do that if you want custom cancel functionality. But for now, it makes more sense to just cancel everything because we don't really need them to move anything for this plugin specifically. Okay, so this method here is where you handle the inventory click event. It'll just be passed in from the internals of SimpAPI. The actual event handler will be created by SimpAPI and handled there, but it'll then be passed into inventory click or handle menu for you to actually handle. So it abstracts the event handler details for you, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. Okay, so hopefully that's great, right? Anyway, so let's handle this now. So we can do it a bunch of different ways, but basically we just want to make it so that when you click freeze player, it opens up a freeze menu, so you can choose a player to freeze. Okay, let's see if we can achieve that. So we can use an if statement, we can use a switch statement. I think a switch statement would make more sense here. So switch e.get current item .get type, and then the case will be packed ice. So if they click on packed ice, then we want to open up the packed ice or the freeze menu. Okay, so we don't have that menu though, so let's go ahead and create it. So right click menus, new Java class, freeze list menu, because we're going to list all of the players that we want to freeze. So public class freeze list menu is going to extend menu just like we did before from SimpAPI, not from AWT. There we go, implements methods, and then also do the constructor. Great. So let's just go ahead and do these one by one. So return the name, so choose a player to freeze. And these can be colored, by the way, but I don't really like to color my menu names for my plugins. And so how many slots? We'll do 54 slots because we can assume that if a server has a lot of players, then it makes more sense to have as many slots as possible. Pagination is not a part of the SimpAPI currently, but I do plan on adding it. It's just a tough issue. So yeah, I'll make a video on that once I add it for sure. So just stay tuned for that, okay? But so cancel all clicks, we can set that to true because we don't want them to be able to move anything. And so what are going to be the items of this inventory here, this menu? We just want to get each player on the server and then make an item for that player and then add it to the inventory so that you can click the head of any player that you want to freeze. That makes sense, right? So to do that, we can do bucket.getServer.get online players. And online players returns a collection of players, so we can just stream it because collections are streamable. So for each player, and so for each player that we get on the server, we can make an item out of that. So item stack, head of the player, import item stack. Darn it. Import item stack. Come on. There we go. And so now we can use the make item utility method here, and we'll do material.playerHead player.getDisplayName. Obviously, in a more advanced plugin, you might want to actually put the player head of the player that you're trying to freeze, like their actual skin. But just for the simplicity of this plugin, we're just going to keep it as just a generic player head. And so then once we have the item stack for that player head, we can add it to the inventory. So inventory.addItemHead. So this will just add it to the first available slot, okay? And we can simplify this actually. We can just use the for each upon the collection rather than using a stream itself. But okay, that looks good to me. Now what we need to do is handle the actual the clicking of those heads. But before we do that, let's go back to Iceberg main menu to open up this inventory. So when they click packed ice, we want to allow them to open up that inventory. So we'll do menu manager. If you remember how to open up an inventory, you can do menu manager dot open menu, the menu class itself. So freeze list menu dot class, and then the player. So the player you can grab from what's called the player menu utility. We're going to explore this more in a second, but the menu abstract class that you're extending here has a thing called the player menu utility, which you can see is passed into the constructor. This is available anywhere in this class here. So we can do player menu utility, and then you can get a bunch of information. You can get data. You can do the last menu, but the one that we need right now is the owner. So if you want to get the owner of the menu, you can do player menu utility.getOwner. And this gives you the owner of the inventory or the menu that you're trying to open, okay? So that'll give you the owner of the current menu that you're in with right now, which is in this case the Iceberg main menu. So we're inside of the Iceberg main menu, but when they click the packed ice, we're going to open up a new menu with the menu manager, which is the freeze list menu, and then pass in the player that we want to open it for, just like we did pretty much with the Iceberg command. We're just using that same method, okay? Anyway, so once we do that, it should open that menu for us, and we should be able to see all of the online players on the server. So let's go ahead and test this out to see if it actually does that, if it opens it for us, okay? So let me just throw this into my server real quick. Perfect. Okay, so now we'll do /reload. All right, so now we'll do /iceberg, click freeze player, and look, there we go, it opens up the new menu. So choose a player to freeze, and now it says Illuminati because I'm the only player on my test server right now. I don't have any other accounts. Perfect, right? So now what we want to do is make it so that when you click that player head, it says like, are you sure you want to freeze them? And then if you click yes, it freezes them. So that's the next thing that we want to try to achieve. But as you can see now, this is how you traverse the menu GUI system or GUI menu system. You just got to use the open menu method and then pass in the owner of who you want, or pass in the player that you want to open the inventory for, okay? So that's how you traverse the system. If you do want to go back, let's say that we want to have a back button, right? So we click this freeze player button, and then we have a back button down here, and we click it, and we want to go back to the previous menu. Let's see how we can do that. So first, let's see what slot this is. So we'll count. So 45, 46, 47, 48, 49. So that should be slot 49 if my accounting is correct. Let's go ahead and see if we can put a back button there. So we'll go to our freeze list menu, and at the bottom here, we'll have the back button. So inventory dot, actually we'll do it in front, because if we do have it after this and there's a player already in that slot, then that'll be like problematic. I don't know what will happen. I don't know if a null exception will happen or what the heck will happen, if they'll just replace it or whatever. I don't know, but we'll just do it before so we can avoid that issue. So we're going to make a new back button. So item stack back is equal to make item material. I like to use a barrier for mine. You'll see what it looks like in a second. So material barrier display name back. We'll do it in red. Color translator dot translate color codes, and for and L for bold red back. Okay, so we'll add that to inventory.setItem44. Is that what it was? 44? I don't remember. I forgot. 49, I think, right? Okay, so set item 49 and then back. Perfect. So, okay, so that should put the item there, but now we want to make it so that when we click the item, it goes back to the previous menu. So we can handle that here, item clicks. And so let's check to see if they click the barrier. So if e.getCurrentItem, which is the item that they clicked on, .getType is equal to material.barrier, then we want to go back. So there's two ways you can go back. So the first way you can go back is just how you open up any other inventory. You can do menu manager.open menu, and then do iceberg main menu, iceberg main menu.class, and then player main utility.getOwner. So that's how you can go back to the previous menu, or you can use this utility method provided by the menu abstract class, inherited from it, called back. So this will just so basically every time you open up a new menu using the open menu method, it'll save that menu instance into a history stack within the player menu utility. And so if you call this back method, it'll pop a menu off that stack and then go to that menu. If you don't know anything about stacks, that's fine, but essentially it just means that it saves a history of all the menus that you've opened, and then you can go back to the previous menu really easily if you just call this back method here. Okay, so let's see if that works. So I'll run this and throw it into the server. So currently it doesn't actually work. I'm getting an exception here because I know what I did wrong. I forgot to add something just to make it work, but don't worry about that. I'll have it working by the time this video is out, so you can use this method without any issues if it's still available, okay? So don't worry about that. So just for now, we're going to use the other method. So just this method here, which doesn't really change anything. It's just easier to use the back method, but that's fine, right? So let's test this out just to verify that it works. Boom, back. There we go. So that's how you can traverse the menu, like go backwards if you want to. Perfect. So let's go ahead and do the functionality where you click a player head and it opens up the confirm menu. Let's figure that out. So let's go ahead and create a new confirm menu. So menus, new, Java class, confirm, freeze menu. There we go. So the menu name will do confirm, freeze, and then the player name. So we're going to figure out how to get the player name in a second. So we'll just set it to something random for now. So the slots will have it as 9. And so cancel all clicks, true. We don't really want them to be able to move anything by default. And set menu items, we're going to have a few buttons here. So it'll actually just be 2 buttons, yes or no. So I can just go ahead and copy this just to save time. So just a yes or no button and then add it to the inventory. Pretty simple, right? So okay, so now how can we get the actual player that we're trying to freeze from the freeze list menu after we click on them to the confirm freeze menu? That's the trickiness of inventories, and this is why I actually made the SimpAPI menu manager, because I couldn't figure out how to pass data really efficiently between menus. And the thing I started with was using, I would pass the data between inventories using the item meta. So I would actually just put the data or the name of whatever I'm trying to pass into the item meta, and then I figured out, well, I learned about persistent data containers, so then I would pass the data into persistent data containers of items. But the whole idea of passing the data into items between the inventories is really annoying, so I didn't really like that. So it was just really complicated and not very easy to use. So I just thought of the idea, what if you just have this class that goes alongside your menu system for each player that you can put data into, and then you can grab it from the menus dynamically. So this is achieved using what's called the player menu utility. This is a class that has some information. Let's go to our freeze list menu here. So we have our player menu utility. It's a part of every single menu that you have, and this grabs all of the data that you pass in between your inventories. You can save data to it. Let's say that, okay, so let me give you an example here. So let's say that they click one of the player heads from this freeze list menu, and then it's going to save that player object into the player menu utility, so that when you go to the confirm freeze menu, you can grab that player object from the player menu utility and then use it. So you can grab the player name from it, and you can also have it here, so it'll actually freeze them when you click yes. So that's how that's the main function of the player menu utility, is to pass objects and pass data between menus really easily. and they're associated with keys because they're stored internally into a hash map. But also the other information that you can grab from the player menu utility is the actual owner of the menu, like we saw a second ago. So we can do player menu utility.getOwner. So that's the other data that's stored within the PMU. But the other thing, like I said a second ago, is the history of the menu, so that you can easily call the back method to go back to a previous menu. So that's the other thing that's stored within that. So let's go ahead and see how we can use the PMU, the player menu utility, to store a player object into it so that we can grab it into the next inventory really easily, so we don't have to worry about data transfer that much. Okay, so we're inside the freeze list menu right now, so we're going to say if else if e.getCurrentItem.getType is equal to material.playerHead. So if they click on a player head, we want to get the name of that player from the item somehow, and then get the player object from that as well. So how can we do that? So first of all, this loop here is going to create a head for each of these players and then add it to the inventory. So what we can also do is save within the persistent data container of this item here the UUID of the player, so that when we click the item, we can grab it, make a player object out of it, and then store it within the PMU to be grabbed within the confirm freeze menu. Okay, so this is an example of where storing stuff within the item stacks is actually helpful. It's not very difficult and doesn't really make your menus more hard to use. In this case, we're just storing a UUID into the persistent data container, so it's hidden, it's easy to grab when we click the item itself. Okay, but the other thing we can do is actually just get a player object from the name of the item itself, because as you know, each item has the display name of each of these items is the name of the player itself. So what if we just access the display name of that player from the item meta and then make a player object out of it? That's actually even easier than using the persistent data container. But you can imagine circumstances where accessing the persistent data container is a much better method for other types of data that you can't easily store within the display name and stuff like that. So yes, it just depends on what you're trying to do and what you think is the best approach. Okay, so those are two options. We're going to take the second option. We're going to grab the player object from the display name of the item. So when they click the player head, we want to try and obtain a player object. So player target is equal to bucket.getPlayer, and then let's see how we can grab it. So we can do e.getCurrentItem.getItemMeta .get display name. So this will get the display name of the item. Perfect. And then it'll be passed into get player, and then if the player exists with that name, it'll give us the player object. But one thing you have to be wary of is, as you can see, it's red right here, right? It's red. So we want to strip the color from this so it does not have any of the color codes. So we can do chat color.strip color, pass that in, and now we'll just get a raw string with the actual player name and nothing like color codes added to it. Okay, there we go. So now we have a player object, and so finally we can store this within the player menu utility to be grabbed inside of the confirm freeze menu. So how can we do that? We can do player menu utility .set data, and you can either use this one or this one. So we'll use the second one first, the string identifier, the key of the item, the data that you're trying to store, and then the data itself, which is just any object that you can pass in. So you can pass in literally anything, right? Which is really cool. So player menu utility .set data, and the identifier we're going to use is player to freeze, and then the data that we're passing in is just the player object. Great. So now that player object will be stored in a hash map within the player menu utility under the key player to freeze. And then finally, we want to open up the confirm freeze menu after we do that. So menu manager dot open menu confirm freeze menu dot class, and then the player itself that we're opening it for. So player menu utility dot get owner. Definitely not the target. The target's the person we're trying to freeze, not the owner of the menu that we're opening it for. Okay. And by the way, in case you're curious, I should probably tell you that so each player on the server is going to have their own unique player menu utility object, because it wouldn't make sense for players to share a PMU. They all need to have their own unique PMU so that when they're traversing the menu GUI system, they'll have their own data. They're not sharing data among other people. Okay, so everything is isolated in that sense. So that's hopefully that makes sense. Okay, but you don't even have to worry about that. It's all abstracted. You don't even have to think about those details, but in case you were curious about that. Anyway, so it should open up the confirm freeze menu. So inside of here, we can now handle what happens when you click the yes button. Okay, so let's try and do that. So if I'll use the switch statement again. I switch between the two, just depends on what my mood is. So get type, case, green banner is the item right here for the yes button. So green banner. So if they click the green banner, that means they click yes. So when they click yes, we want to actually freeze the player. So how can we do that? So first we want to actually get the player that's being frozen, right? So we'll grab that from the player menu utility. So player target is equal to player menu utility dot get data. This time we're using get data instead of set data, which makes sense, right? So get data, and we have 3 options for this, or 4 options. We can just provide the identifier, so player to freeze, and this will return a object. As you can see, it'll return an object that you can cast into the data that you saved and that you want to save into the variable. So you can cast it like that. But, I mean, you can't do that, right? But if you don't want to have to cast it every time, what you can do is also use the overloaded version of this, where you pass in the class reference for the data type that is stored within the key here. So you can do player.class, because we know that what we stored inside of player to freeze, the key, is a player object. But to make sure that what you pass into the second parameter here is literally the data type itself. Like, you cannot, if you do something where you mess up and you accidentally do an item stack instead, you know, you're going to get an exception. You're going to have problems, right? So make sure you actually know the data type of what you stored and you're keeping track of that somehow, okay? Anyway, so the target, we're grabbing that. So we're grabbing the player from the player to freeze key from the player menu utility, storing it into a player target variable. And now we want to freeze that player. So how can we freeze that player? Let's think here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Iceberg main menu class here, or main class here. And we're just going to create a simple array list of frozen players. Array list player frozen players is equal to new array list of players. Great. Make sure import player. Okay, so any player within the frozen players array list should not be able to move. But first, before we set up that functionality, let's make it so that we can grab that and then also set that. So code generate get frozen getter and setter. There we go. Great. So now you can access the array list easily outside of the main class here, or main plugin class, because it has the onEnable method. So now we need to make it so that when a frozen player tries to move, it cancels the move event for that player. So we're going to go and make a listener class of that. So new listeners package, new Java class, player frozen, what should we call this? Frozen listener. Great. So implements listener from bucket event handler, public void on player move. So player move event E. So now we want to see if the person who's moving this event is a part of the frozen players array list. So if E, or we can do if iceberg dot get frozen players array list dot contains E dot get player. So if that player is within the array list, and we want to do E dot set cancel true to prevent them from moving. Otherwise, we'll not do anything, so they can move freely without any issue. So that should work. Now let's register that event listener here, or yeah, event listener. So we'll do that here. So get server dot get plugin manager dot register events new. What is it? Freeze listener, and then this. Perfect. So that should prevent them from moving now. So let's go back to the confirm freeze menu. So we can do iceberg dot get frozen players dot add target. So we're adding that player to the frozen players array list. So it'll freeze them essentially. And let's also go ahead and clean this up a little bit by closing the inventory for the person who's using the inventories. So after they click yes, it'll close it for them. So player menu utility dot get owner dot close inventory. So it'll close the inventory for that person who's using this confirm freeze menu. And let's also just go ahead and send them a message. So player get owner send message. We'll say let's do like something like target dot get display name has been frozen. So it's like confirming that they have been frozen. Really simple, right? Okay, so that's a lot of code that we just wrote. Let's go ahead and test it out now to see if it actually freezes them and the menu system actually works, okay? All right, so we'll do /iceberg, freeze player. Illuminati, yes or no. Click yes, and it says Illuminati has been frozen. As you can see, I cannot move anymore. Perfect. Awesome, right? So now we need to make a way for us to melt ourselves. We don't have that. But also let's make it so that when they click no, it takes them back. Let's try that. Okay, so we'll go to here. So case red banner. Then we'll take them back to the previous menu. So menu manager dot open menu, freeze list menu dot class, and then player utility dot get owner. There we go. And also something else we can do is we can add something called filler glass. So to make our GUIs better looking, we can add filler glass. It'll just add some gray glass around in the empty slots to make it more filled in. So let me show you what that looks like. So if we go to our confirm freeze menu, and down here in set menu items, you can do add filler glass, and this is inherited, or set filler glass. This is inherited from the menu abstract class. And this will just, like I said, this will fill all of the empty slots with filler glass, which are just gray glass panes essentially, okay? So we'll do this to all of our inventories. So even this one here, and this one here, great. Now let's go ahead and see how that looks. Okay, there we go. So now, as you can see, it looks a little better in my opinion. You have filler glass here now, and you can traverse the menu and it looks more filled in. Good, right? And also you can go back now, which is cool. Perfect. Awesome. So now I'm going to challenge you. My challenge is that try finishing this plugin to make it so that you can melt players after freezing them. That's your challenge, okay? So currently we have completely set up the freeze player system, so you can choose a player and freeze them. But also now I want you to finish the plugin by adding the melt player system. So you can choose a player that is, so essentially you click the melt item, you click this here, this button, it opens up a list of all the frozen players on the server. And then if you click one of those player heads, it'll allow you to confirm whether you want to melt them or not. So to allow them to move, okay? So see if you can achieve that. Try pausing the plugin, see if you can do that. And then once you're done, you can check the code link in the description below in the GitHub, and you can see how I did it. It's essentially the same thing we did for the free system, except a little different. So make sure you check that out to see if you did it correctly, if you want to try the challenge without cheating, okay? So just pause the video, see if you can achieve that, come back and check the code, and then see if you did it correctly, okay? So before I end this episode though, I want to show you one more thing you can do to make your life easier for a menu manager, okay? So let's go back. So currently, when setting data and accessing data with the PMU, the player menu utility, you can use string keys, right? Let me find where I'm using that. So here we have get data. So here we're doing player menu utility dot set data identifier string. It's a string key, and then the target. So in a big plugin with many different classes and lots of data that you're transferring, it may get really cumbersome to have to remember all of the keys exactly, and then, have to put them here and then, all that, right? So what you can do is create a enumeration or enum that allows you to just put it, you can pass that as a parameter instead of the string here, and then internally the code will convert that enumeration that you pass in into a string. So you don't have to worry about memorizing strings. You can just pass in the enumerator or enumeration, enum, whatever you want to call it, to the set data method and the get data method, so you can do this more easily. So let me give you an example of how you can do that. So go to menus and do new Java class. You can call this whatever you want. I'm gonna call it mine. I'll just call mine menu data. Make sure you select enum. Okay. So what we're passing currently is just player to freeze, right? So we're just gonna make an enumerator for that. So or enumeration, I forget. So we're gonna do player to freeze. So now any place where you would use and have to memorize this key here, you can just replace it with data.player to freeze. So now it'll just convert it to a string behind the scenes for you, and you just have to worry about using this enum now instead of memorizing it. So now when we go to get data, we can just do the same thing here. So in get data, we can just do menu data dot player to freeze, and that'll grab it without any issue. Perfect, right? So that'll make it easier for you. I recommend doing that. Oh yeah, one thing we forgot to finish here is the confirm freeze title here, right? So if we do this and go here, look what it says. It says confirm freeze, blah, blah, blah. We want to make it so that it actually shows the player name that we're trying to freeze, right? So how can we do that? So currently we're grabbing the player down here, the target. So we could just copy this code. So just copy this and then paste it here, .get display name. That is one way you could do it, pretty simple. Or if you want to make it, just better, you can just you can have it as a variable to be accessed globally within the menu. So you only have to call this get method once. That'll be more efficient, I think. So we'll have private final player to freeze. And we're going to assign that in the constructor. So in the constructor, we can do player to freeze. Player to freeze is equal to this here. So we're setting that in the constructor. So when this menu is created, we're automatically grabbing the player to freeze and then storing them within the player variable. And great. So now instead of doing it here, we can just pass in player to freeze .get display name, and then here player to freeze. Makes it easier to read and it's more efficient because it's only calling the get data method once. You're only having to search the hash map once, okay? Anyway, so it should say the player name now in the confirm menu, so let's go ahead and see if that is true. Look at that, so confirm freeze Illuminati, and it's in red too, it looks really good. So we're gonna say yes, and now I'm frozen, perfect. Cool, right? There we go, so that's how you can create a very, very simple plugin using the menu manager, part of SimpAPI. If you really like this, I hope you do, let me know, leave a comment below, and you can also give me ideas for things that you want to improve for it. And also the SimpAPI itself is open source, so if you want to contribute to the project, add some stuff that you think would help plugin coders, then you can make a pull request. I recommend DMing me first to ask if this is something I want to add to it, because it would suck for you to code it out, make a pull request, and then I would deny it because it's not something I want part of SimpAPI. So if you do want to contribute, it is open source, so just DM me on Discord and I'll let you know, and we can talk about it, okay? Anyway, so that's it. Hopefully you like this. The code for the plugin is in the description below, as well as SimpAPI itself. And also, if you want to join our Discord server, you can join our Discord server and get some friends. You can get some help on programming projects or help on anything that you're trying to understand. So yeah, just make sure to join the Discord community. It's a great community for programmers who are passionate about the same things as you. The final thing I want to tell you about is the join button below. You can click that join button and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month, and you can cancel at any time. You get some cool perks like early access to all of my new videos, a cool rank on my Discord server so you can show everyone how cool you are, and also you get to see yourself on the screen like you see right now. So thanks to all of you guys who have joined. If you can't join, that's okay. I still appreciate you watching this video anyway. Okay, so that's it. If you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And